ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one and the unique. It is He alone that we worship, and it is His blessings that we seek. He is the Lord of the oppressed, and He answers the call of the weak. So today we're going to inshallah continue our Tuesday Q&A session, and we'll begin immediately. We have two very juicy and very interesting inshallah questions. The first question comes from Abu Dhabi, our brother Firasat. He says that he's been looking into Islamic finance, and he says that, can I explain in simple terms, he has this point underlined, can I explain in simple terms the concepts of murabaha and musharaka and mudaraba, and also can I recommend some books on modern Islamic finance in the English language? So these are simple questions inshallah ta'ala, so let us begin. Now, as I've said multiple times, that I have never claimed, nor do I view myself as a specialist in modern Islamic economics. I'm just a minor student of knowledge when it comes to the field of modern finance. And I always, whenever I talk about finance, I give you the opinions and positions of ulama, far greater authorities in this field, in the contemporary issues of finance. However, this question is an easy one because it deals with the classical definitions. Apparently, our brother wants to know how do we understand these terms, so that when we open up the books of fiqh or the modern Islamic finance text, that these terms can then be understandable. So inshallah, what I'm going to do is present these concepts in very simple language with illustrations that inshallah will be useful for the beginning student of knowledge. And of course, as I've said again multiple times, that modern Islamic economics and the fatawas related to it is a very, very interesting enterprise of how classical fiqh connects with modern fiqh, and why and how it is necessary for some areas, not all, but for some areas that we rethink through, because our modern economic system is so radically different from the way that bartering occurred 1,000 years ago, that you cannot open up any book of early Islamic law for the first 1300 years and then expect to understand our modern day transactions. You have to extrapolate, you have to rethink through. And so these terms, mudaraba and musharaka and murabaha, these are terms that are found in early Islamic law that are now being used quite a lot when it comes to the issue of modern finance. And because of this, it is important that we understand the classical issues. So let us begin with the first term, murabaha. Murabaha, from the root rabaha, which means to profit, which means to make a profit. Ribh in the Arabic language means your profit. So if I purchase this water for $10 and I sell it for $15, my ribh, my profit is $5. So murabaha is the active engagement of making a profit. And what murabaha entails is an offer to buy merchandise at a set amount of profit. You make an offer to purchase a person's merchandise, and you state in the offer that I'm going to give you such and such a profit. However much your cost was, however much you spent on the initial investment, I will give you such and such a profit. A very simple example. Suppose I have come back from a faraway land and I have imported this product, okay? I say this is a product that I have purchased from a faraway land, and I've come back to my home country and I purchased it once again, let's say for $10, okay? Now, generally speaking, if you walk into a store and I have this item on display, you will not know the cost. I'm going to advertise it for $15, let's say, and it's up to you to buy or to not buy. The difference in murabaha is that you know the cost of the item, and you then add onto it, you tack onto it, the buyer, not the seller, the buyer tacks on the profit and says, I will give you a profit of 10% or of $10 for every bottle, whatever it might be. You tack on the profit and you make an offer to buy based upon a specific profit amount. And this transaction, so for example, I come and tell you, I purchased this bottle of water from, mashallah, it is from France, this one, okay? This bottle of water for, let's just say, $10, okay? And I come back to America. And you walk into my house or my merchandise store, whatever, and you know, and I have said that this bottle is $10. And you say, okay, I will buy all of your water bottles that you purchased for $10, I will buy it and give you a profit of $2 each. So you will be getting $12 for every 10, or $3, or I'll pay double. Doesn't matter how much profit you put on. This is called murabaha. So murabaha is an offer to purchase merchandise with a known amount or percentage of profit. You can do either amount or percentage. Amount means I'll give you $2 for every bottle more, or percentage, I'll give you 20% for every bottle more. This type of transaction is permitted by unanimous consensus of all the scholars of Islam. There is no problem whatsoever, because this is what would be the problem. Everybody makes a profit. You know, when you sell something, that's where everybody desires to make a profit. And if you yourself offer the profit amount, you yourself say, I'm going to purchase this for, $2 profit or 20% profit, why would that make it haram? Ibn Qudama in his Mughni says that this type of transaction, murabaha, this is jaiz, permissible, and there is no controversy over its impermissibility. In fact, he says, I don't know of anybody who even said it is disliked, who even said it is makruh. And so this is a completely permissible purchase. Now, obviously, the concept of murabaha has nothing to do with riba, because you are not taking a loan in the first place. I am selling you merchandise, and you come and I own the merchandise, and you come and you make an offer to purchase the merchandise. Now, riba would be I give you the money and then you pay back more money. That's a totally different concept, and of course there is no similarity between a real murabaha loan and between an murabaha transaction and between an interest-based loan. Now, you can also purchase in installments by unanimous consensus. There's no problem. If I were to say, hey, I'm selling this bottle for $15 and I purchased it for 10, you say, okay, I don't have 15, but can I pay $5 every month? So you will pay 5, no problem. This is completely permissible. And if you offer me the payment in installments and you offer me the profit, that too is completely permissible. So this is a bottle for $10. You know it's $10. You walk into my store, we're friends, we're acquaintances, or however reason you know it's $10, and you say, okay, I'm going to purchase this bottle for 15 and I'll pay you in installments $5 every month. This is the essence of murabaha. There is no problem whatsoever. So this is murabaha. Now, why is murabaha interesting in Islamic finance and modern Islamic finance and in purchasing houses and cars and whatnot? Well, because now we get to the whole issue of the gray area. Today's lecture is not about modern Islamic finance. I'm just going to link a little bit so you understand. I have given a much longer conversation with Dr. Hatim Al-Hajj. You can find this on our YouTube channel. Just Google it, myself and his name, and is modern Islamic financial transactions. I've also spoken to Dr. Akram Nadawi about modern Islamic finance and these so-called mortgage loans and whatnot. So you can listen to those lectures for more information. Nonetheless, a brief introduction to this, that why is murabaha mentioned when it comes to Islamic finance and houses? And that is because that some banks, they offer a type of transaction that is a modified murabaha. It's not the classical murabaha. They add some conditions, and this is where the gray area comes. Now, the modern Islamic financial transactions that banks do, they try to make it obviously more user-friendly, and they try to make it more pertinent to the culture that we live in, and sometimes the conditions that they add are considered problematic. For example, some scholars, very small group of scholars, will problematize the fact that you go to somebody and you tell them to purchase when they had no desire to purchase. This is the first issue. So suppose I don't have this bottle of water, but I can afford it. I am the person who has $10. You don't have $10, but you want this bottle of water. What if you were to come to me and you were to say to me, hey, can you go to purchase this water, and I will pay you murabaha loan. I'll give you a profit of 10-20%. I promise you I'll give you the profit and I'll pay it in installments, right? And so The bank will go purchase the house or the car. The bank had no desire to purchase the house or car. It will purchase the house or car for, let's say, 100,000, and it'll then, you have said, I promise you I'm going to make a 15% profit for your house or purchase. So then you sell it 115,000 and you sell it in installments. Every month he's going to pay 2,000 until the entire house is paid off. This is called this transaction is called بيع المرابح بيع المرابحة للآمر بالشراء. بيع المرابحة للآمر بالشراء. The concept of murabaha, but now somebody is commanding you to buy the merchandise and you didn't have the intention to buy it. Now this is, again, here's where we're making a classical concept try to fit to our understandings of how the modern world works, and in and of itself there's nothing wrong with that, but again the issue comes to what level can you add conditions. The vast majority of modern Islamic finance experts have said that this type of transaction is permissible with some conditions, and of those conditions is that the bank or the middleman or the rich person actually owns the merchandise and acquires the merchandise and puts it in his name and then sells it on to you. So it's not just going to be a paper transaction that this bottle of water remains where it is and the ownership is transferred from the first owner to the third person, and the middleman is simply just giving the money and taking the money and whatnot, because then it becomes very fishy. However, if the middleman, even if he's told to buy it, if he says, okay, now it's my water bottle, you know what, I have the right to change my mind. Even if you told me to buy it, well, that's your request. Now that I own it, suppose I want to sell it to somebody else, I have that right. Or I can sell it to you based upon our verbal agreement. All of this is something that makes certain problematic areas less problematic, i.e. the fact that you own the property or you own the water bottle in the middle and then you have a second transaction to sell, it makes it much easier than if there was simply just a paper transfer from the first to the last. Also, of course, one of the biggest issues is that there should be no penalties on late repayment, and that is something that, of course, we don't believe in late penalties. So again, you can look up the different fatawas and different conditions that are put, but this is what murabaha is, and conceptually speaking, pretty much all of the fiqh councils of the modern world and all of the modern Islamic finance experts have said, if the person goes to a middleman and asks him to purchase with the verbal agreement or even the written agreement that I'm going to purchase based upon a profit, as long as the middleman party actually acquires, and then there's no haram conditions and clauses, and then they give the merchandise at the agreed profit in installments, that would be a permissible transaction. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Of course, in reality, banks add so many conditions and clauses to such murabaha loans, and this is where Islamic banks, this is where the problem comes. So we're not going to go over there, as I said. As for musharaka, musharaka is a very broad concept, and it basically means a partnership, a financial partnership. So just like the word shirk, a partner with Allah, sharik is a partner, right? So musharaka is a business partner from the same concept of shirk, which is creating a partner for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the concept of shirk is to have any partner, sharaka, sharik. Sharik means your partner. So musharaka is a financial partnership where two or more people come together and they all invest in a project, and they then share the profit and the loss of the project. And again, no problem whatsoever. This is how the world works since the beginning of time, and it will continue to work. You want to, let's say, make a building and sell it for a profit, but you can't afford to make a building on your own. You can't afford to buy the land. You come together with 10 of your friends and you say, okay, let's all put together 50,000. And then we have 500,000. We will purchase this plot for 150, 200. We're gonna, build a house for, $300 something. Then we'll sell it for $600,000, $700,000. So we pooled together. We got $500,000. We made the project. We did it. Now we're gonna sell the house, and then we're gonna make a profit off of it. This is called musharaka, and it's very straightforward, conceptually speaking. Obviously, you can have infinite types of partnerships, what percentages, how many people, to what percent each person is required to invest, what are the rights and privileges of every single partner, because you don't have to share the exact same rights and privileges. What are the percentage profits, and can you get more profit than your initial investment? So for example, if somebody invested 30%, another person invested 70%, must the profits and loss be shared at 30 and 70, or can they renegotiate because one of the partners is more involved with the project than the other? These are all questions that our fuqaha have discussed, but the concept of musharaka is something that there should be no controversy over, and there is no controversy. Theoretically, the concept of musharaka, i.e. multiple people coming together and forming a business ventureship, or partnering, I should say, on a business ventureship, this is called musharaka. And it becomes problematic once again when you start adding many conditions, and the person who's basically, in this case, the financial institution, the bank, is adding so many conditions that essentially they're almost guaranteed, or perhaps they are absolutely guaranteed to never make a loss, in which case there is no question that any time you have a business partnership in which there is the potential for loss for one side and not the potential for loss for the other, there is no question that that entire enterprise is extremely shaky, if not outright forbidden, because there is a principle in Islamic law, al-ghunmu bil-ghurmi, that when there is a chance for having a profit, there must also be a chance for having a loss. There cannot be guaranteed profit for any of the investors, or else you are walking into a land field of interest. The point of interest, the reason why riba is haram, is because the rich are guaranteed to get richer, and the Sharia does not allow that to happen. When people come together for a partnership, the goal and desire is for profit, but there should be a risk of loss, and that risk of loss, here's the key point, must be shared, not necessarily equally. The one who invests 10% is not going to be like the one who invests 90%, but even the 10% person, there must be the percentage of loss. It could be 10%, it could be less or more, depending on the agreement. But the problem comes again when the third party, in this case the Islamic banks or whatnot, they add so many conditions that sometimes it becomes basically a guarantee almost. So how does it work? Again, I'm being very simplistic here. Again, this is not a lecture on modern Islamic finance, but our brother wanted the basics, the summary. That much inshallah we can do in this lecture. So how do Islamic banks function on the musharaka model? So the bank and the buyer of the house will enter into a modified musharaka, where they will both purchase the house. 5% is owned by the person, 95% by the bank, because the person gave only 5,000, the bank gave 95,000. Let's say house is 100,000. So the bank owns 95% and the person owns 5%. Okay, technically that's allowed, no problem. But then the bank puts the condition that you must purchase my 95% share. Okay, that too is not a problem. You can have that condition. But then the bank puts another condition. But in the meantime, I own 95%, so you need to pay me rent on that. And so what ends up happening, and again this is, so you have a diminished musharaka al-mutanaqisa al-muntahiya bit-tamlik, you have a diminishing partnership over time. That end result is that you continue to increase your percentage ownership, and eventually the bank becomes 0% owner and you become 100% owner. This is called diminished partnership that ends in complete ownership of the house. This is one of the most common mechanisms of the modern Islamic banks when it comes to Islamic financing. And again, some scholars allow it, some scholars don't allow it, and again why and whatnot is besides the point of this. However, theoretically, musharaka is a very simple contract and there should be no problem. The problem comes when you keep on putting conditions such that one of the parties, in this case the Islamic bank, is pretty much guaranteed in some cases to make a profit. And anytime the bank is guaranteed to make a profit and you are not guaranteed to make a profit, you could become a loss or whatnot, this is really pretty much open shut case that in such scenarios the bank is basically co-opting a mechanism of riba. You need to be careful for that. But again, I'm not speaking about every single contract. There are some musharaka contracts with Islamic banks that there's much more leeway and they're much better and they have conditions that are reasonable. So again, this is not a topic on modern finance. You wanted to know musharaka, I told you what is musharaka. And the third term you asked about, dear brother Firas, is mudaraba. And in fact, mudaraba is a type of partnership, it's a type of musharaka, and it's actually very, very simple to understand. Mudaraba is a musharaka in which one of the partners has the money and the others has the skill set. Simple as that. So rather than every partner coming with money, which is basically the common musharaka, if one partner has money and the other partner has a skill set, and the two come together to form a cooperation, a business venture, and they agree to share in the profits and in the loss, agree to the percentages. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be 90-10, 70-30, 60-40. However they want to decide, it's a mutually agreed upon partnership. So, for example, suppose that a person is a handyman, he's a carpenter, and he wants to open a shop to do his carpentry, but he doesn't have the money for a shop. So a rich investor comes and says, you know what, I like you. You're a nice guy, you're an honest guy, and I like your quality of work. I will finance the shop. You will do the manual labor, and the money that is generated, we split it, 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 90-10, whatever they agree to. This is mudaraba. Suppose somebody has, mashallah, cooking skills, chef, a nice chef, and an investor says, you know what, your skills are so good, you should open a restaurant. And the person says, I don't have money for a restaurant. No worries, I will give you the restaurant, I'm going to finance it, I'm going to do everything, you are going to be the chef and whatnot, and then you bring in your sweat and labor, I'll bring in the finances, and then this is the contract. You must have the contract, you agree, percentages, who was going to do what. All of this must be agreed upon before you enter into a mudaraba. In fact, again, by unanimous consensus, no problems, there is no again, musharaka and all of these are conceptually no problem. How you interpret them in the modern world by adding all of these conditions is where it becomes a gray area. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was involved in a mudaraba contract. You're all aware of it. He was, before he got married, what did he do? Khadija radiallahu anha, she approached the Prophet ﷺ and she said, I'm looking for a business partner. I'm looking for somebody who's going to take my caravan to Bilad al-Sham and manage and barter and negotiate and make a profit. And that person, some reports say, keep a third and I'll take 2/3. Okay, so this is mudaraba. This is exactly what mudaraba is. Our Prophet ﷺ and Khadija has the wealth. Our Prophet ﷺ has the honesty and the skill set and bartering and negotiating. So Khadija gave the wealth to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ went to Bilad al-Sham and he bartered, negotiated. He came back with a massive amount of profit. He gave the percentage to Khadija. He took the percentage guaranteed to him, and Khadija was so impressed at his honesty and his bashfulness and whatnot. The rest, as they say, is history. And the concept of mudaraba, again, there is no difference of opinion. By ijma', it is allowed as long as one side gives a known amount, the other side does the specified job, and the profits are split according to an agreed upon percentage between them. You cannot split profits by a number. In this case, mudaraba, you cannot say $100 because you do not know. If you say $100, you're paying him a wage. If you say $100 a day, that's a salary. That's not mudaraba. That's a different type of contract. Mudaraba is you are sharing the profit and loss, and you're sharing based upon percentages, and each party comes to the table, one with the money and the other with the skill set. Now again, when I say one, it doesn't have to be one. It can be 10 people, 5 of them with money and 5 of them with skill sets. The point is that mudaraba is that type of contract where not everybody is bringing money, and there must be a known percentage, a known amount of work, everything. There cannot be any unreasonable unknown. However, once again, what happens once again is that in our times, sometimes conditions are placed that basically make it an interest loan. So for example, the bank says to the chef that, okay, if you make a profit, we're going to get 70% of the profit. However, if you make a loss, then you must pay us back. We invested 100,000, you must pay us back 100,000. For example, just giving a hypothetical example. If the bank puts this condition, it is not mudaraba, it is an interest loan. Because you cannot place a condition that you're guaranteed to get your money back. The point is, and this is the whole difference of the philosophy between Islamic finance and between the modern financial world. Islamic finance, because there is a chance of loss, you are going to raise the bar of critical thinking and of making sure you're getting it with the right person. You're going to do your research and due diligence. If you have the money and you are looking for somebody to make some profit, you're going to make sure you find the right person, the honest person, and then you will face the consequences if you made a mistake. However, banks, they don't care. They don't care if you have bad credit, no credit. They maybe even want you to fail because they're going to confiscate. You're going to go on the street. They're guaranteed their money. And by the way, the whole 2008 crash and complex, the whole industry that crashed here in America is because of this issue, that the banks knew that they're giving loans to people who could not pay them back, and they didn't care because from their perspective they're going to get rich off of that. And the system is a massive Ponzi scheme, but I don't want to go there. Let's stop there right now. Point being that you cannot play with economics in this fashion without getting blowback, and that's what happened in 2008. In the Islamic Sharia, you do not enter into such types of transactions where there is a guaranteed profit. On the contrary, there must be a genuine risk. And so, if you invest 100,000 in a good, qualified carpenter or a chef or whatever, and for whatever reason his carpentry doesn't sell, you know what? The both of you are going to have a loss. He's going to lose all of his time and effort. You're going to lose your money or a portion of your money. That's the loss that happens. That's the whole point here, and that's why such a transaction becomes halal. Anytime you eliminate the risk and eliminate the chance of loss to one party and not to the other, then you are walking into the room of riba, of interest, and that is not something that our Sharia allows. So to conclude here, and as I said, by the way, you can use this as a litmus test. Anytime you have a partnership, a group of people in which the more powerful and the one that's basically the elephant in the room, let's say, or the 800-pound gorilla, as they say, right? Anytime you have a partnership in which one person, typically the most powerful one, is guaranteeing that they're never going to make a loss, and others have a chance of making a loss, then take this as a litmus test that what you're looking at is not a business partnership. It is in fact a mechanism, a hiyala, to overcome something that is haram and to try to make the haram halal, and that is a type of riba. There must be a genuine risk of loss upon all parties. Not all the same. For example, if somebody invested 90% and the other person invested 5%, the loss is going to be different. The 5% is going to lose less, but there must be the chance of loss. So, mudaraba is the business transaction in which one person brings skill set and the other person or the other partners bring the money. To conclude this first question, what we see about modern Islamic finance is that they take these models that are found in our rich heritage, and they understand that these models, they need to be modified, conditions needed to be added, the context needs to be refined, and they then present them to the end user. And in this process of refining and adding conditions, which overall is what fiqh is all about, contextualization and looking at your circumstance, some of our scholars allow some things, other scholars do not allow them, and this is where the gray area becomes. And so you can find out more about that by listening to lectures on modern Islamic finance, and you go to the experts for that. The brother also asked for a book list. I will recommend 3 books, and it doesn't mean I'm endorsing every single paragraph of these books, but you wanted a book list of where to begin. So I'll give you the first book by one of the most authoritative references on modern Islamic finance. I have skimmed through this book and benefited immensely from it. It is called An Introduction to Islamic Finance by Mufti Taqi Uthmani. An Introduction to Islamic Finance by Mufti Taqi Uthmani. Mufti Taqi Uthmani is one of the world-renowned specialists in Islamic finance. He is from Pakistan, and his father was the Grand Mufti of Pakistan as well. And so, this book has been translated to English, and you will find it on Amazon. So this is definitely a book that I encourage you to read if you're interested in modern Islamic finance. Another one, actually written by a non-Muslim, but I found it to be very simple and very user-friendly, and it's something that non-specialists will benefit from, and he's simply gathering together the simple facts. It is called Islamic Finance in a Nutshell, a guide for non-specialists. Islamic Finance in a Nutshell, a guide for non-specialists by Brian Kettle, K-A-T-T-E-L, Brian Kettle. Islamic Finance in a Nutshell, a guide for non-specialists. If you want something a little bit more in-depth and a little bit more specialist, then one book that I can recommend overall, and again, doesn't mean I agree with everything, and who am I to disagree? I'm simply saying this is one of the authoritative references. It is an edited volume by Tariq al-Diwani, edited, so he has a whole bunch of different articles and different chapters from different authors, and it is called Islamic Banking and Finance. And this is more of a in-depth work. So this is not something I'd recommend for the first user, initial user. Rather, if you've read some basic books or you have a background in finance and you know classical or basically mainstream finance, then you go to the more advanced book, and this is one of them, Islamic Banking and Finance by Tariq al-Diwani. Now again, there are many books out there. I don't mean to discourage you from other books, but you asked me my opinion, and these are books that I have some experiences, especially the first one, Mufti Taqiy's a standard introduction to the topic, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Our second question. An anonymous sister, well, she asks to remain anonymous, as you'll see why. She has a very lengthy question, which I'll summarize. Apparently, she says that she got married to a man, and after she got married, she discovered that the man had an illegitimate child from a lady from before their marriage. Obviously, he was not married to that lady. And he, the father or her husband, still has a relationship with this child. He brings the child over every once in a while, and she was not informed of this child before the marriage, and now she feels uncomfortable, especially because the two of them have children and they have daughters, and she doesn't know, is this boy considered a mahram to her biological daughters, meaning this child is not from marriage, this child was from a relationship that was the marriage, premarital intercourse, basically before they got married as well. And she's also asking, does that child have any financial right or inheritance rights over my husband, who is the father of my children? Should this boy be considered a part of my family or not? Now, no doubt, I'm basing my answers on what you said, so I don't know his side of the story. If what you have said is true, no doubt, for you to not have been told is not something that is good. This is not information that he should have kept hidden from you, because, of course, while the marriage is valid, obviously it is not healthy to keep such secrets, because you are the life partner of this person. He has a child that is his, and also the fact that he was in an illegitimate relationship is something that you have the right to be affected by. Let me put it that way, right? And so it's not something that what he did was not right by not telling you. And you should have been made aware of the circumstances of this person and this child, and then make an informed decision. However, the fact that you were not told or not aware does not negate the validity of the marriage contract between you and your husband. So your marriage contract is valid, because whatever sin the man or the woman has done before the marriage does not, meaning sin of a sexual nature, it does not invalidate the marriage itself. And so the previous sins of a spouse with a third party or a child being born does not nullify the nikah that is taking place. But no doubt what the person has done is not something that is praiseworthy, and you have the right to feel irritated, and you have the right to express that irritation, and that he should make amends for whatever way possible. However, to move on to the more technical issue, this was the moral, if you like, outrage or whatnot. Now we get to the technical issue. This issue is multifaceted, and I'm going to give you generic rules. I do encourage you or your husband to go to a sheikh and a local sheikh and explain your situation, so that the sheikh can quiz you and get more details. Again, that's something that pretty much all the time, if there's a specific fatwa, go to a specific scholar, so that any type of exceptional circumstances can be taken care of. I can't do that in a generic Q&A, but I will give you generic knowledge about this issue of illegitimate children, because it is something that people need to know about, and we seek Allah's refuge and protection from ever having to deal with it ourselves. Do realize, by the way, that this issue of unwed children, or children born out of unwed marriages, this is one of the greatest dangers of intercourse outside of marriage. As it brings about children, it results in children who don't have stable families. And this is one of the main reasons, not the only one, not the primary, but one of the primary reasons why our religion has legislated sexuality, and that why it encourages sexuality only within marriage and it forbids sexuality outside of marriage. We also need to know that the child of an unwed couple is absolutely blameless in all circumstances, and that never should such a child carry any blame or be made to feel guilty for what the parents have done. It is true that some books of Islamic fiqh, some books of law, some of them, they do say that the child born of such a marriage should not be the imam or should not be a person of power or dignity, but that is their cultural understanding of certain generic aspects of the Sharia. In reality, the Quran is explicit, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that no soul shall bear the sin of another. Whatever the parents might have done, the child is sinless. And it is not the fault of the child. The circumstances of the birth of the child have nothing to do with the honor and dignity of that child, and it is unbefitting and unbecoming and un-Islamic for anybody to diminish the honor of that child for something that the parents might have done. So we need to be very explicit and clear about this. The child deserves nothing but love and comfort, and no one should make the child feel uncomfortable. Anybody who does this is doing something that is sinful for the person that is doing it, and the child is free of any sin of the parents. The next issue is that the child that is born outside of wedlock, technically it does not take on the legal protections afforded by marriage. Now again, we have to differentiate between the moral status and the dignified status of the child, which is unblemished, versus the technical perks that come from being born in a marriage situation. That's something separate. And a child that is born outside of the wedlock does not take on any legal protection of a marriage, because there was no marriage. In fact, that's one of the purposes of marriage. Marriage brings about legal protection between the partners and for children born from that partnership. In Islamic law, the child takes on the name of the father, the financial responsibility is that of the father, the child inherits from the father is financially responsible for raising the child, etc., etc. However, if the child is born outside of the wedlock, then the default position is that there are no such protections, and therefore the child will not take the name of the child, of the father. The child will not inherit from the father, and we're going to come to this point again, but again, this is the default position, that the financial responsibility will not be on somebody who is not considered to be the legal father of the child. This is the default position. Now, if the woman is married and zina occurs with another man, that's something totally else. In this case, the child shall take on the name of the married husband, and any external affair will be ignored and neglected by anybody outside of the marriage situation. No one else has the right to interfere in a marriage situation. Even if modern tests are done or whatnot, it means nothing to us, because our laws are not necessarily the same as biological laws. That's a separate issue. Our sharia, our fiqh is not necessarily the same as biological DNA. So if there is a married couple and wal-iyadhu billah, we seek Allah's refuge, zina occurred and the married lady gave birth to a child, and DNA later showed that this child is actually the son of so-and-so, from an Islamic perspective, we will ignore that, because our Prophet ﷺ said, Al-waladu lil-firash. The child is ascribed to the marriage or the bed that it was born upon. Al-waladu lil-firash. This is the rule of Islamic law. There's only one exception, and that is when the father himself, when the husband of this woman says, no, this child is not mine. And the husband then undertakes a particular process called li'an or mula'ana. We're not going to go down there. That's a technical thing between the husband and wife. The husband, and only the husband, has the right to say, I know this child is not mine. And then there's a procedure to be done. An outsider cannot and should not get involved. It's none of their business. And if the couple has passed on and modern DNA tests bring out about some other news and whatnot, this is all relegated to, the footnotes, and it doesn't affect anything, technically the child shall remain according to the marriage. So al-waladu lil firash. A married lady who has a child, that child is ascribed to the marriage and not to any type of affair, illicit affair that might have occurred. Even if DNA shows to the contrary, that means nothing, because we want to just cover up anything that would have happened and provide dignity and sanctity to the marriage itself. However, if the lady were single, not married, and the father and mother of the child both agree and claim that this child is theirs. So this is now a couple, a boyfriend, girlfriend, a premarital couple, whatever. They are together for a while, and she's not a lady that's sleeping with multiple men, so doesn't know. No, she has been in an illicit relationship, but with one person. And the two of them, then they have the child, and then they claim, both of them, they say, this is our child, we know it's our child. Now, if they decide to get married, can we backtrack the marriage? The child is already born, clearly before the nikah. We're not talking about a gray area and within 7 months or something, less than 9 months, whatever. If it's 6 months after the nikah, no problem. But so the child that is born after the nikah, even by 6 months, inshallah, no problem, we don't ask. However, what if the child is clearly born and then the nikah takes place and the couple says, this is my child? So here we have a majority and a minority opinion. I hope this is a clear situation. Both man and woman are unmarried. The both of them committed zina with one another. The both agree and claim that this child is mine. If there's disagreement or whatnot, then the whole situation falls apart. And the both decide to get married. So now they have a legitimate nikah and a child from an illegitimate relationship between the same two. The majority position, which is the default of the 4 madhabs, is that the child shall be considered illegitimate even if the marriage takes place. However, Ishaq ibn Rahweh and Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and many modern scholars, including my own teacher Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, they argued quite forcefully that in this case, with all of these conditions, we shall backtrack the marriage. And we shall overlook that the child was born before the nikah, and we shall consider the child to be a legitimate child, name and inheritance, and everything will be established. And this is the position that I also follow, and it is in line with the goals of the Sharia, where we want to cover up a sin and we don't want to criminalize the child, penalize the child. We want to cover up any sin and not make a big deal about it, and we want to protect the interests of the child and to not have any backlash about the two have repented clearly and they're trying to make amends, they're trying to get married together. They do get married together in this case, according to Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and many modern scholars, that we extrapolate the nikah, if you like, and we simply claim the child to be a part of the basically a legitimate child from this union and from this marriage. However, the sister's case, the one that emailed me, this man had a child and did not ever marry the woman that he had the child with. So this does not apply to this case. So if he had married, or even if he gets married, a legitimate nikah, meaning not a fake one, a legitimate nikah, and the both of them, they know that this is their child, they were together for that period of time, and they both acknowledge this, according to Ibn Taymiyyah and many ulama, in this case the child shall be considered a legitimate one, and we don't ask about their past. However, if there's no nikah, then there's nothing to extrapolate. So in your case, your husband did not engage in a nikah with this lady, and so you cannot extrapolate back to this. So the child is going to be considered basically, technically, legally not his. However, what does this mean when it comes to financial responsibility? So because the default position is that the father, the biological father, is not the legal father, and there shall be no inheritance, so those scholars said, likewise there shall be no maintenance. Okay, when there's no technical or legal linkage between this child and between the man who sired him, even if it's a biological father, so they said, just like there's no inheritance, and just like the child does not have to obey the father and whatnot, so too the father does not have to give financial support upon the child. And this is the default position of our earlier scholars. Now, doesn't have to does not mean that he should not. There's no doubt that he should, especially if the child is having difficulty being raised by the mother and her relatives. And here I want to just point out, and I always, when it comes to Islamic law, I do not view myself as, astaghfirullah, ever being independent of the giants who precede me. I always am a minor person in their shadows, and I never give a fatwa or a position that is unique and unprecedented in Islamic history. There are some areas that I don't mind exploring, some issues of Islamic theology, some issues of the seerah of the Prophet, some issues when it comes to the concept of ulum al-Quran and ahruf and qira'at. There are certain issues I don't mind being a little bit more, going out on a limb and being in a very minority, or maybe even bringing something new, and I will defend myself when I do that. But when it comes to Islamic law, I have always said that I am simply following giants, and I never break away from those giants. I don't consider myself to be qualified to practice ijtihad in Islamic law. However, I will simply point out that a group of modern scholars, and this is a modern opinion, are arguing that a person who engages in illegitimate intercourse with a lady, that person should be partially, if not fully, financially liable as well. And this is a modern opinion. And so I'm simply saying it's there. I'm not endorsing it because I don't feel qualified to endorse such a minority position, because it is only being argued by a group of modern Muslim ulama. In the classical position, I'm not aware of anybody who obligated upon the biological father the maintenance of the child. But this modern group of scholars, and they're writing in academic journals, these are people that are working in, especially scholars trained in fiqh who then work in courts of law in the modern world. They see things that sometimes people that are simply with their students and reading the blessed books, they don't necessarily sometimes see. And what they're arguing, and I've read a few articles to this point, or an article or two I should say, to this point, what they're arguing is that what happens is that the bulk of the burden is then placed on the woman, the financial burden. And yet the pleasure and the sin was shared by both the man and the woman. So why should the woman be burdened financially when the both of them are equally guilty? Or perhaps even the man is more guilty if he was the one who wooed the lady, and she didn't have experience with men, and he kept on promising and whatnot, and the both of them did a sin, no question about it, and then he just disappears and khalas, ghosts her or whatnot, and then she has to deal with the child in the aftermath. And so there is a modern position that why should the person not also have a financial obligation? So that is something that is a modern opinion. At the same time, I am simply telling you it's there. I cannot, because of my own limitations, I have to stick with the great giants and the established schools in madhahib, and I will say that I am not aware of any pre-modern opinion that has obligated financial support upon the biological father. That having been said, no scholar ever prohibits this support, and it is definitely the morally correct thing to do. If the person acknowledges this child to be his own, then your husband, the fact that your husband is you say that helping the child and taking care of the child once in a while and giving money and whatnot, this is something that is the least that he should do, and there's no problem Islamically doing it. As I said, the issue is whether he's obligated to do it, whether it's wajib or not. No early scholar said it is wajib, but no scholar said it's haram or makruh either. If he wants to give money, he has the right to give money to whomever he wants, and there's no doubt that this child being a part of your husband's life and being taken care of financially is something that is noble overall. Even if the act itself was not noble, the sin was done, but why should that sin be perpetuated? Also, the final point here, and you asked about the issue of marriage, and you're worried that this boy is coming to your house and you have daughters from this marriage, and so is there mahramiyya or is there prohibition of marriage? And when it comes to this issue, the vast majority of scholars, the Hanbali position, the Maliki position, the Hanafi position, is that they say even if the child is illegitimate, still the marital rules and prohibitions will apply. Hence, if a father, if a male and a female engage in premarital intercourse, they have, let's say, a daughter, right? This lady, this girl, shall be prohibited for her biological father and for all of the biological father's sons and for the biological father's uncles. In other words, that girl or the boy, doesn't matter, it will be considered for the purpose of marriage like a real child, like a legitimate child. Not for the purpose of nasab, of inheritance, of patrilineal descent. That, no, they said. But for the purpose of marriage, yes. And of course, there's one madhab that disagreed, and with our utmost respect for that great Qurashi Imam, even if الناس عيال عليه, but this issue we have to respectfully simply delegate to the footnotes and leave it as something to know but never to act upon. No, you just don't do this. Your biological daughter is a daughter for the sake of marital purposes, and you simply do not open this chapter or door, and you leave this position as a minority, never acted upon. The default position of the ummah, and alhamdulillah it is the vast majority position, is that a child born outside of marriage shall be considered a biological child for the purposes of marriage, for the purposes of what is allowed and isn't allowed. And therefore, this young boy that is coming to your house is haram for your daughters, because your daughters are also the children of the same man who fathered this boy. So they are his half-sisters when it comes to what? Marriage. They are not his half-sisters when it comes to the legal rights and privileges, when it comes to the last name, but they are those half-sisters, or I should say step-sisters, when it comes to the issue of marriage. And therefore there is no question, there cannot be any marriage between your daughters and between this boy. Likewise, you as well become haram for this boy, because he is, you're married to his father, and so there's no issue over there. I just want to point out though that this is an issue for marriage. Quite a number of ulama, including Ibn Qudama, they said that yes, marriage is haram, but still hijab should be observed, because we don't want to respect the sanctity of marriage by extrapolating it to situations outside of marriage. And so what they're basically saying is that they don't want to affirm a normal relationship because it wasn't a normal union. Nonetheless, the point is that that's a technicality about whether to wear or not. The main issue is that this child is not allowed ever to marry your daughters, and he should be told that your daughters are the children of your father, and he knows who his father is, as that your daughters are the children of his father, and he should know this, and he should view them as people that he can never marry. And this is the position of Islamic law as well. I want to conclude this by stating that I understand, sister, that clearly this has irritated you and you have every right to be irritated, but I advise you to allow your husband some leeway in showing love and in showing care for this child. It's not his fault. The fact that your husband is spending time with the child and spending money on it, I know that of course it will cause you some grief, because you would rather that he spends on your children and whatnot, but put yourself in the shoes of the child. As long as he's giving you your rights, giving your children and his children his rights, if he gives some time and some money to this child that was born outside of marriage, and inshallah it affects this child to grow up in somewhat of a stable environment, be a productive person, be a good Muslim, inshallah, expect your reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know it's difficult and awkward, and yes, he should have told you, but what has happened, and you being good to others, inshallah, they're going to be good back to you, and inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jal will reward you. And also, I know the child is not yours, but once again, it's not the child's fault, and for you to show as well some kindness and love and compassion, and again, just to bring the heart of the child close to, the family environment and whatnot, inshallah, you will get your reward in this, and in the end, Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Until next time, Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما.